Welcome to the garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below the video, and that's where we pick from each week. I've written down 24. I'm actually shooting this the Friday before, 2 Fridays before you're watching this video. I'm trying to shoot a couple of these because Steph and I are in and out of town a little bit, so I wanted to get a little bit ahead. So if you're not hearing the answer to a question that you asked in last week's Q&A, it's because we haven't even, that's not part of these, but we are pretty far ahead on questions, so I'm able to get out ahead a little bit. But anyway, next week's question and answer will contain some of those questions from last week's Q&A as you're watching this, which I'm filming this one before that. Okay, anyway, I did a live Q&A that'll be almost a week and a half ago as you're watching this now, and we're going to do a few more of those in the future. I kind of enjoy that that rapid fire question and answer thing. It's kind of what I've done my entire life in this business, really, is answer gardening questions for people. So helpful where I can be. You know, some things I obviously, some things there could probably be a couple answers even here where I'll go, there's not always a great answer for some of the questions that we get. The weekly garden planner is $50 off for the month of August. Again, I added the garden journal to it, and I've added the seed starting app to it as well. And I'm going to continue to make improvements on those two. And then I've got some other things that are going to go up on the Learn to Garden video series that you'll learn about later. But anybody who's purchased that, you know, anything that gets added to it is yours in the future. And the discount code is on the screen. There are about half the t-shirts over on the website are sell priced if you're interested in a t-shirt over on the website. So let's jump into some questions here. This person's had a massive amount of rain in central North Carolina. They have yellowing leaves on many shrubs. Is it beneficial to apply a light fall fertilizer now to help them? No, I definitely wouldn't be pushing plants toward the end of summer here. Number one, a lot of them are in a bit of a summer dormancy. Some things continue to grow right through the summer, but a lot of these shrubs are like in a, you know, why won't it cool off situation. So I'm definitely not going to go out and start pushing things when they're already under stress. I think once we get cooler nights, that those plants should be able to catch up on nutrients that they need to, you know, to not be yellow in the top of the plant. But, you know, we can get stress on plants in various different ways that show up as yellow leaves on them. If it's down in the interior of the plant, like I'm literally next to this Mahonia right here, it's in a container right here beside me, and it's got yellow leaves down in the bottom. Usually that's an indication that I'm underwatering this plant, but the top of the plant's really rich dark green color here. So it appears to be getting all the nutrients it needs. It's just occasionally not getting enough water, so it's deciding to shed a few leaves because it can't supply water to every one of these leaves. So that's what it's doing. If the yellowing was up in the top of the plant, I would assume I'm overwatering it in some way, or it's not getting some sort of nutrient it needs. But me dumping fertilizer at that is not necessarily the answer. It would be back off on the watering. Obviously it's raining, you can't back off on that necessarily, but fertilizing, that's not going to help. It's got a root related issue that even if it's, so let's say it's a phosphorus deficiency or a potassium deficiency or a calcium deficiency that's causing the yellowing, or an iron deficiency that's causing the yellowing up in the top. The iron is there, you know, it's there in the soil. The plant's just under some sort of stress that's not allowing it to take the iron up. So what would me throwing iron at it actually do in some sort of fertilizer? It's already there. So it's not necessarily that you're deficient in something, it's that the conditions are not allowing that plant to use the nutrients that are in the soil already. So again, I don't fertilize in midsummer, period, but I'm also trying to kind of explain a little bit my thinking around fertilizing stressed plants. Typically is not going to change the conditions. You're not, you know, throwing iron at something that's iron deficient when it's iron deficient because it just can't process that iron because it's too hot, too wet, too something, is not going to change the conditions really. Okay, all right. So this person said extreme heat weather exacerbated decline in Hugendorn holly. So Hugendorn hollies are Ilex crenata or Japanese hollies. Small leafed holly, I think, is one of the more industrial of the Japanese hollies. You know, sky pencil hollies can can struggle with drought-related issues. Soft touch hollies are maybe the worst of all of them in terms of just just dropping dead when it's dry. They're not good at telling you. A lot of these other leafy evergreens this Alyssium right here, which I think you can see maybe a little bit of, it'll wilt when it tells me it's dry. You know, here, oh, there's another Alyssium. It'll wilt when it's dry. Japanese hollies aren't great at letting us know when they're dry. They got 2 out of 6 of them dead. What point to give up and replace? That's up to you. Again, I think probably in all likelihood, in extreme heat conditions, you're going to have to give Japanese hollies more water. And so, you know, I don't know at what point I'm giving up on all of them, but I've got a neighbor up the road that's probably had 20 soft touch hollies, and I've just watched them die one after another over time. And again, it's each time we get a round of 100-degree temperatures and 4 or 5 days without rain, you know, another one I can see start to brown out and die. You know, you can just see it. Hugendorn, again, typically is a little more tough than Hellerise and some of the others, but if those are declining, if you're not able to, you know, maintain them more, you know, whatever, I don't know what's going on with it in terms of how you're watering or whatever, then yeah, probably would be replacing them if you're not able to. You know, again, it's like one of those plants, you go out in your garden and you look around and you go, oh, everything seems to be doing pretty well. But the conifers aren't telling you they're dry because they're just bad at it unless you know what you're looking at. You can tell when conifers are dry, but that's a lot of experience in my lifetime staring at them, you know, to kind of know when they show signs of being in a wilt. And then Japanese hollies and a few other things, they just don't tell you. They just up and die or start to thin out badly, that kind of thing. But anyway, and then they ask if dwarf Yaupon hollies would be a good choice. Yes, they're native and overall are probably just more industrial, we'll call them, than a lot of the Japanese hollies that we use in our gardens, like Compacta and Hellerai and Hugendorn and on and on and on. Sky Pencil, Steeds. There's a ton of Japanese hollies we use. None of them are particularly heat tolerant and really very industrial plants. I'm not saying not to use them at all. I didn't say that. I've got a golden Sky Pencil holly over here. I've got several Ilex cronatas out here. I like them. But I'm conscious of the fact that they're the first thing that will die in this garden under extremes. Okay. Opinion on Don Egolf redbud, zone 8A, Alabama. I love Don Egolf redbud. If you follow the channel for a long time, I planted one at the old house. It's a Chinese redbud. The Chinese redbuds tend to be multi-trunked from the base. And our native redbuds can be this way too, but the Chinese redbuds are almost always multi-trunked from the base. And whereas our native redbuds will bloom on the old wood down the old stems, Chinese redbuds do it right to the ground. I mean, the whole stem gets covered up. So they're architecturally super interesting in the wintertime. But we have, lots of native redbuds here in this garden. I don't have a Chinese redbud in this garden, but I did at the old house, and Don Egolf was was a really great variety. But I love the fact that thing, even on the oldest growth all the way to the ground, it's got flowers up every stem. So they're a bit more floriferous, I would say, overall. Let's see. Somebody was just talking about our garden design. They're gradually adding plants, and they're gradually adding plants like we do here, and it's become a little bit more of a hodgepodge than ours is, where it seems like ours ends up a bit more organized. First of all, I would, when you're laying plants out, if you're bringing plants home onesie like we do, and you're not dedicating groups of 3s and 5s and doing those kind of drifts, we're doing drifts of 1 here. If you're gardening that way, I highly recommend buying the plant, bringing it home, and moving the pot around in the garden before you stick it in the ground. Find a place, where, this cast iron plant, which I think you can see the top of with this wide, broad leaf on it, next to this fine textured Mahonia, next to this, leafy evergreen Alyssium here, contrasting with this gold Alyssium, Florida Sunshine Alyssium, and then this Camellia with this slightly larger leaf back here. All of these things contrast really well together. But what you can do is take a plant that I want to put into this group somehow and put the pot, you know, where you're thinking about putting it for a few days before you plant it. Plants sometimes will select where they want to, where they're going to go that way. I'll move things around, get a cup of coffee, move it around a few times, see where it kind of lands, where it really contrasts well with the other things. Because that's what we're trying to do. The only way you can make one of a kinds look good together is to have each individual plant contrast in some way, and that can be size, shape, you know, round, tall, skinny. So size, shape, texture, you know, just this fine textured leaf on this Mahonia versus this really broad leaf on that cast iron plant. Color, you know, foliage color like this, flower color can be contrasting, obviously. And we're looking, the only way any individual plant in here is going to stand out, because there's 400 plus plants out here, is for them to contrast with their neighbor. So I highly recommend taking something and moving it around the garden until it goes, yes, that's the spot. That thing really stands out in that spot, and it makes the other things around it stand out a little bit as well. So that's our strategy for that. It's a difficult way to garden. It's a much easier way to garden to go and find 10 varieties and get 3 or 5 or 7 or 1 of each of those, and then put them together than it is to do this. But again, at the end of the day though, there's always something happening here because there's so many different things. So it turns out to be fun. And there's spots here and there that look just kind of like, ugh, you know, look like a train wreck. But I go to the other side of the bed and they look good from the other side. So feel free to move things too. That'll be my point there. Somebody's they got a Japanese maple in zone 8 that get burned every year in midsummer. They think maybe it's too established to move. It gets varied shade every day through the day. Recommendations, water. It's the only change you can make on, you know, foliage burning on things. I'm always torn when I'm making these videos and I'm putting labels on the screen and I'm labeling a plant, you know, soft caress Mahonia here, and I put it on the screen, part shade or shade, zone 8 to 10 or whatever. That, you know, I could probably take more sun if I was giving it an adequate amount of water to compensate for that without drowning it. You know, I'm not saying, you know, I'm also not saying go drown it, but a little bit more water. I mean, think about how that thing is actually burning as it's losing. Water is coming out of those leaves faster than, you know, it's being replaced. And so I think an old established tree, you may not think about watering it as much, but a couple times watering it at key moments during the summer will probably prevent a little of that burning, but not all of it. So that would be my thing, is that if you're going to keep it there, it might be something you drag a soaker hose over to a couple times during the summer and give it a little bit of additional water and see if that has some impact on it without, again, drowning it. Why would you plant a shrub in a smaller container and move it into a larger container instead of starting with a larger pot? We had this issue at the nursery where I would take teeny tiny plugs and put them into big giant containers, and I got this thing figured out. I don't know why these guys are putting it in a 1 gallon and in a 3 gallon and then a 7 gallon and a 25 gallon. I'm just gonna put it in a 25 gallon because I'm smarter than everybody else. And what happens is you end up overwatering it, or that's such a big surface for weeds to be growing in. So now I'm weeding the thing more because it's not shading any of the soil over the pot. It turns out that plants actually need to be a little root bound in a container, not super root bound. I'm not talking about so root bound that all the soil's gone out of it and you have to, you know, saw roots off of it when you're planting it. But a lot of plants, when they get out to the edge of the container and meet a little bit of resistance, actually end up flowering a little better, growing a little better for a little while until it becomes too root bound. So that transition is a fine line there. But a small plug put into a 1 gallon size container will end up with a little more growth on it during the season and few more flowers on it than if I'd have stuck it into a 3 gallon container. And I also risk overwatering it that way. But I like to step them up that way, let them get slightly root bound, meaning that it holds together when you pull it out of the container, but not so much that it's just all roots. There's, again, a delicate balance there. But I did, like any other nurseryman, probably go, I don't know why they're potting them up like that. There's a reason for it. If I pot something I'm ultimately going to grow into a 25-gallon container as a small plug in the middle of that, I'm going to lose a lot of them over time. Plus, it's hotter. I mean, you know, again, these plants out here are shading one another. So when you go to a nursery, they want them spaced to get enough sun on them to grow, make sure they grow evenly all the way around. But the plants still are a little bit protecting the bottom of the pot, the roots just a little bit on each other, you know, side by side like that. Sun's about to run me out of this spot. I've had a nice little morning here where it's cloudy. Let's see. That was number 6. Somebody had their roof replaced and they had annuals that were trampled. Is it too late at this point to plug something in? Too late to seed? Is it too early for cool season flowers? It's definitely too early for cool season flowers, like pansies would be an example of that, but it's definitely not too late to do. You can still do cosmos, you can still do zinnias. Marigolds are fantastic and will grow right through the fall. Weirdly, I've never understood, you know, the obsession over fall mums. You know, everybody goes and buys, you know, mums and fall mums and put them everywhere, and then sometimes they plant them, sometimes they just throw them away. But even the planted ones, the breeding in those is not great for, you know, the plants coming back and looking great in the garden the next year. They're really just, the breeding is all around making them look good, you know, when you go shop at Halloween, you know, in the garden centers, little round balls of mums. But marigolds will bloom past the first frost. You know, the marigolds just are the chrysanthemums just bloom out all at once and they're kind of done. I really think that more growers should consider growing a fall crop of marigolds for people to plant into their gardens. And again, they'll go through that first frost. Heck, if you throw a cover on them, the first freeze, you can probably get past that first freeze and get 2-3 more weeks out of them a lot of times. But some of the giant marigolds are quite beautiful in the fall, and they have the same kind of fall colors, yellows and oranges and that kind of thing. But you could definitely do marigolds, zinnias, cosmos. You have plenty of time to do some of those things that will take mild frost in the fall. Let's see. And we do that with our vegetable garden. Anything that we have left at that point where we're about to get a frost, if you cover, typically you'll get a frost, you know, a freezer frost, 32 to 35 predicted degree night, and then you'll get pockets where it'll go below freezing, where you'll get frost on stuff. A lot of times if you cover that one night, it's like 3 weeks later before this next threat of frost or freeze happens. Okay, new garden bed created and wanted to transplant plants into it. Is September too early to start? They're in zone 7A, B, Richmond. No, definitely not. As soon as the nighttime temperatures are cooler, I'd be planting. So if that's late August, the earlier the better for me, for sure. They are planting Annabelle hydrangeas, phlox, butterfly bushes, fothergilla. All those things are going to be they're super cold tolerant and pretty rugged plants. So as soon as you get nighttime temperatures that are cool, the thing to be careful with in Richmond in September is it's dry. It's one of our driest months of the year. Typically August, we get a lot of thunderstorms and you get these heavy afternoon rains. It's one of the wettest months of the year. And then September, October can be quite dry. Statistically, April is our driest month, but I think that October is actually our driest month if we didn't have tropical systems that distort that data a little bit. Because we get the occasional tropical storm that gives us 12 inches of rain in September or October. And so the September-October time frame appears to have a little more rain than April, but if you don't get those tropical storms, typically it just doesn't rain at all during those months. So if you are planting that time of year, make sure you're watering. Somebody asked about moving perennials while blooming, and it was Shasta daisies was one of the things on their list. They're in the Pacific Northwest, zone 8. Is that okay? I'd take the flowers off of them. If I was gonna move them, you know, I'm not gonna move them with flowers and think that's gonna go okay. So I'm probably gonna take the flowers off of them. Those Shasta daisies don't really come back as well for us here in Raleigh. There's some that do a little bit, but for the most part, they just don't perform overall year over year for me that great in this Raleigh garden. But In the Pacific Northwest, as long as you're not having one of those heat domes, you know, and it's in the 80s or whatever, that's probably fine. Again, I'm just going to take the flowers off when I do it. Is it easy to grow Japanese maples from cuttings? No, not really. Most all of the material on Japanese maples is either going to be from seed, and that's usually for the understock trees are going to be grown from seed because they germinate readily from it. I got a neighbor up here that picks Japanese maple seedlings out of his lawn all the time. He's on his hands and knees picking Japanese maple seedlings because he's got a straight Acer pallidum or Japanese maple green version that just seeds itself like crazy out there. It's like he's farming them over there. But most of the time they're either done from seed like that, and then they're grafted onto those. There, with some exceptions, they're rootable. There's some trees that just flat out are almost impossible to root. A lot of oaks. Although there is some, I went to a nursery called Angel Oaks, I think is near Athens. I may be wrong about the name of that. And they actually do some rooting of oaks, which is kind of wild because they're notoriously near impossible to do from cutting. So we can't, it's hard to clone oaks, meaning that you find some interesting characteristic to an oak. You can't root it to clone it, you know, to pass those things down. You still are collecting acorns and doing them from seed, basically. But that's typically not how Japanese maples are done in a nursery setting. They're not done by cuttings. Okay, this person has azalea and they had a bird's nest in it, and the result is seedlings are coming up through the azaleas. They're big before they see them. How do you get rid of them? This is one of those there's no good answer for. Unfortunately, you got to get down in there with a pair of gloves and you got to dig the roots out on it. They've tried to cut them off, but of course stuff just comes right back. So we get that with porcelain berry a lot of times, and normally, oh, there's a porcelain berry right there. I didn't have to look far, did I? If I pull this, it just breaks. This is porcelain berry vine. Gets a beautiful berry on it, but it is a terrible, terrible weed. But when I try to pull it, it's the same thing. A bird sat up here on the silicium, seed dropped down on the ground. Perfect place for a vine. This thing is so well designed that birds, it knows birds sit on things. And then, you know, the seed ends up in the middle of your plants and they come crawling up on top of them. Then I pull it, it breaks off. Well, I've done nothing. You really have to get down in there with a trowel. So again, that's a terrible answer from Jim, but that's the answer. What is the best way to protect the plant that needs protecting in my zone? So they bought an osmanthus that they're in zone 6. There are some zone 6 osmanthus. So it is possible to have osmanthus in 6, but they knew it wasn't the best choice, but they love it. Should they cover it or use some sort of protective spray or cage with straw? I definitely would not do the cage with straw technique around a leafy evergreen. So a lot of times you'll see people will protect things like crepe myrtles in zone 6 by using a cage and put straw in them, and then the plant might just get killed down to the top of the straw, and then they get rid of it in the spring. There are plants that can be protected that way, but those are mostly deciduous plants that lose their leaves in the wintertime that you would protect that way. You can use some of the anti-desiccant sprays on, you know, people use them on boxwoods and other things. It basically prevents the wind from pulling the moisture out of the leaves during the winter time on leafy evergreens. So you'll see boxwoods and other things in the north sprayed with those sprays. I think at the end of the day, it's probably best to just cover it, to get a frost protection blanket and cover it, and then uncover it on days when you can uncover it for sure. You can add, probably with a frost protection blanket, one of those white frost protection blankets that I used to use at the nursery, you can probably get about a half a zone per layer. So I would probably put 2-3 layers on it when it's cold. You can get that material probably pretty inexpensively on Amazon. So this person said, garden influencers, transplant like it's easy. I kill plants every time. Please show us with more detail. Okay, I probably do need to do how to plant a shrub video, and so I'll do that in the next few weeks. I think it's probably time to occasionally show some basics here in the garden. So that was a good reminder for me that sometimes, you know, I did those videos in the early days, and then once I moved past those, I'm like, I'm just going to bore people if I, you know, show some some just basic thing, starter things, or what, I don't know, starter things. I don't want to say it in some, a way that's, anyway, some of the knowledge that really needs to be known in order to garden well. So I'll get on that, and I don't disagree with you that I got to the point probably the last 3 years I just show myself in a sped up piece of video that planting something in 8 seconds is probably not overall helpful to newer viewers of the channel. Will Pachysandra choke out other perennials planted under maples? So yes and no, probably some, but number one, Pachysandra likes kind of semi-moist conditions, and so typically under maples it's going to be a little dry, and so that Pachysandra is probably going to have a terrible time actually competing with that tree. But other things are too, probably. So that's disadvantage to everything that's trying to grow under a maple. So I don't know if you'll be able to establish the Pachysandra thick enough under there to help you, and even then there'll be some weeding in it. So everybody in this neighborhood who has used Vinca Major or Pachysandra or even English Ivy or anything else, something will still come up through it. So there's going to be some weeding regardless, but not that I'd recommend any of those things I just said. I'm just saying that, that people who have used those techniques to try to prevent weeds are still getting at least a few weeds, but you need even moisture under that tree to have that Pachysandra actually grow. And then the next question, of course, is another red maple question. This is, I've said this a lot of times, they're not easy to garden with. I do not understand, and I never will understand. They're beautiful in a nursery container. They're really easy to grow. A lot of the whips are grown over in Tennessee and other places, and they're sent to these nurseries, and they're put in 25-gallon containers, already pretty big, and they're beautiful trees when they're put in the ground. But they're not easy to garden with, and don't belong in a lawn in somebody's front garden in the suburbs. They just don't. They're better tree options than red maples. I get it. I mean, when one is doing well, when one is in a container, I get it. The 3 days it turned red, it was spectacular. Let's see. They have red maples, are greedy for water. Are there some drought tolerant plants that could withstand being under them? Yeah, that's part of, we've talked about this. Drought. We're going to have a drought tolerant shade plant video. I'm filming this on a Friday. Tomorrow morning I'm going to the Ralston and filming that video, because the Asian Valley at the Ralston has a lot of plants that are competing in a very dry space, and they're not really giving anything extra in there. So we're going to go through some of those plants in an upcoming video. But again, if you're planting something under an established red maple, you're going to have to water it for a while. I don't care how drought tolerant. I mean, this cast iron plant right here is the perfect plant to be, to grow in dry shade conditions. It takes 3 years to get that thing rooted in enough where I don't have to think about it. So, that hellebore sitting in front of it that you can't see on the video right here, perfect plant. There's a pulmonaria up the line. There's a cephalotaxis up there. They're all, these are things that will take dry shade that you still are going to have to for a year or two. We say water them well till they're established. Well, that can take, this Elysium I may never have watered again. It's probably gotten water because a couple other things have been watered, but it's established enough. It had to be really, really dry for me to need to water that plant at this point. If I had it in a drier place up the line up there, I'd probably still be watering it 2 years later to get it established. Okay. So this person has serviceberry leaves eaten up by Japanese maples. Will it come back next year, or just go ahead and replace it? It'll definitely come back next year, but so are the Japanese beetles. So, keep that in mind. They love those rose family things, serviceberries in the rose family, and Japanese maples just, they love roses and all things roses. And of course, lots of other things in your garden as well. But so that's just going to be a cycle unless, you can kill all your neighbors' lawns. But that's just going to be a cycle where it's going, hopefully it may diminish in time, and hopefully you can get some shade over your turf areas in your garden, and your neighbor's trees will grow a little more, and the Japanese maple population will decline a bit, maybe over time. New small crabapple devoured at night, and it says probably not deer. Anything I can do to help it recover and make it through the winter. I don't think there's anything you can do to make a plant that's been damaged in some way. I can't imagine what else it would be damaging it at night though than a deer. And it makes sense that on a crabapple that they would, eat those new leaves. Another rose family member there. How to get it to recover, probably leave it alone, get it covered at night in some way so it doesn't take any additional damage. Really at this point it's like, don't let it take additional damage. So put some sort of cage around it, prevent something from getting to it again, and then get out of the way of it probably. This person has parts of their Caryopteris declining and dying back in Maryland. What could be happening? We had the same thing happen on ours in the front garden, and a lot of people say they only live 3 to 5 years, although I had Caryopteris at the old house that were 15 years old, but in some cases in our gardens they're very short-lived, and so that's likely what's happening. Is it's just that time. I don't know how old this one was, but usually 3-4 years in, if they're gonna have a short life, that's about when it will happen. Blue Fortune's Agastache, 5 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet wide. It's too big. They had to tie it together. They haven't over fertilized it. Can they size control it or get rid of it? So there's one way to size control some of the perennials that get super tall in the back of your border, and that's to give them the Chelsea chop during the growth. So as it's coming out, before it blooms, as it's starting to really stretch out, you can cut the thing in half, and then it will come back up and bloom, but it will bloom lower than it ultimately would have. So that's a technique that people use to size control. It will delay a little bit the flowers each season, but it will bloom at a lower height. For me, I'm not gonna get rid of it. I could transplant that thing so easy to another space that you can allow it to get bigger. That would probably be your best option, because my Blue Fortune's Agastache over here has bees on it I'm filming this at 8 in the morning. Everything else still has enough moisture on it that they're not out yet, but that thing is already covered in bees. Number 20, loblolly versus longleaf pine in zone 7A, Oklahoma. They see loblollies everywhere. Will longleaf work? It may be worth a try, but that's not the area that they were actually native to. It's well out of the native range, and zone 7A, Oklahoma, which is probably pretty far out in western Oklahoma before you get to zone 7A, is probably not the right place for a longleaf pine. If you look at if you Google longleaf pine native range, you'll see it was basically from Norfolk, Virginia, east of Appalachia, all the way through the southeast, all of North Florida, and then all the way to East Texas. And that, apparently when Europeans got here, it was just a forest of longleaf pines, giant longleaf pines, and they're beautiful for those of you who haven't seen a longleaf pine, because if you come to the southeast, you're gonna see lots of pines. We farm pines for building houses all over the country, but most of those are loblollies or slash pines, and then but the longleaf pines were most of what the original pines were. They were gigantic. They have these, as you might expect, a very long needle on them, and when they start off in the ground, they're like at this grass stage. They're quite beautiful. And then when they're in this stage where they're like 8 to 15 feet tall, they're incredibly striking. You can pick them out from a long way away as you're riding down the road, but a lot of replanting I see now is longleaf. So that's been an interesting, I see as they're clearing old slash pine in a lot of places, or clearing old loblollies. The replantings now are a lot of times longleaf, so it's nice to see it making a comeback. They do. Typically, those forests required fire occasionally, and we're not going to allow that to actually happen. So the forest won't be exactly what it was before, but at least we're seeing those longleaf pines get some respect again. But I think you're well out of the range. Like, you're not close to the range. So I don't think so. Let's see. Zone 6A, new construction, a ½ acre of woodland, wants to create manicured woodland eventually. Anything I can do to keep the weeds and limit erosion over the winter as home is completed. I mean, you can cover the ground in some sort of, make sure the ground is covered in some way with mulch, the leaves that fall in the fall. Make sure that you're staying on top of those tasks. If I was clearing out this wooded area right here, right now. I mean, I wouldn't take not taking the trees down, but there's English ivy and other things back there that need to come out. I would, you know, mow that stuff off as much as possible and then get it covered in wood chips or leaves or something to try to suppress it going forward, and start to, you know, make sure that I'm not losing anything in that wooded area over the course of the winter. The ground needs to be covered. It's the answer to every gardening question. Every single gardening question you could ask me, cover the ground in organic matter, and whatever the problem is will probably get better in time in your garden. That's the biggest issue, is the earth is always trying to cover itself, and humans are constantly trying to uncover it and wondering what's going wrong. Let's see. When to prune muhly grass in zone 8B, Georgia. Some people would tell you probably never, because there's some things that overwinter in those native grasses, and then the new material will just come out and come over top of it anyway. But typically you'll see them cut back in this area about the time new blades are starting down at the bottom. So that may be late March for us here. So it's really about monitoring them in the area that you're in. They're in zone 8B in Georgia, so it might be March 15th. When you're seeing that new growth start from the bottom, is the time to cut them off before that green growth gets tall enough that you're cutting the new growth. You don't want to be cutting the new growth for the season. And then some people just never. Let's see. This person is in zone 8A in Apex, North Carolina, which is part in the same county I'm in here in Raleigh. Apex is the peak of good living. That's what they call it. Let's see, is there a small 4 to 5 foot conifer pyramid form for the South? They like the videos content that we do about conifers, but most of them get too big. So yes, there are a lot of conifers. You know, there's some twinkle toes and globosa nana, cryptomeria. I've got a cryptomeria, several dwarf cryptomeria here in the garden that ultimately will creep up that big. We've got Caryopteris obtusa gracilis nana out front, but ultimately it will get bigger than that. What else we have? We have that sapphire nymph, Cedrus atlantica out there. So here's the problem. If you want a 4 to 5 foot conifer for your garden, that lemonade cryptomeria that I have out front could be kept that size. The problem is all the ones that will only reach 4 or 5 feet in 20 years are going to get there extremely slowly, right? And then the ones that would get there quicker are going to blow through that 5 feet. So I don't have a great answer for your question. If you want one that only gets 4 to 5 feet or can be kept 4 to 5 feet forever, you're probably going to start with something that grows, that's this big and grows extremely slowly over the years to get to that height. So not a great answer for that question, because if you plant something that's going to get 4 to 5 feet in a hurry, it's not going to stop there. Okay, last question for this week. Again, weekly garden planters, $50 off for the rest of the month of August. It's August 50 is the code to get it. And these 2 new things that I've added to it. First of all, I mean, it's a weekly garden planner. It's literally a week by week garden planner for the year. There's pruning time section on there for basically any shrub, tree, ground cover, vine, when you would prune it. And then there's these 2 new items that have been added to it, the seed starting app and seed inventory app, and then the garden journal as well. So, okay, last question for this week. How many Soil3 and chip drops have we had? So I put down Soil3 in this back garden initially before I put wood chips over the top of it. I didn't really need to do that one. So I'm going to subtract that Soil3 delivery from my total, because the wood chips were completely adequate for that. So in an ongoing way, the only place I use the Soil3 compost, which is that big yellow bag of compost, it only is a few states in the country where you can get this material. Other places, hopefully there's some other type of compost that you can get readily to your garden that has undergone some testing for chemicals and those kinds of things, and disease related issues in that compost. And it's gotten hot enough to actually kill off any pathogens that are in it, that kind of thing. The only thing I use the Soil3 compost for now is annual plantings in my vegetable garden. So now it's, let's say it's 1 bag a year. I probably don't need that anymore, but I am using it. But I could probably just use the leaf compost and other things that I could create out here to do that. So let's say over the 5 years we've been here, maybe 5 bags of Soil3 compost total for all, but that, you know how many annual beds we have here. I'm doing way more color than most people are going to do in their gardens. And so that's the whole vegetable garden and all the annual beds. So the probably normal garden would be, you know, a third of that. And then chip drop, I think we probably had 3 loads to cover this initially. And I've continued to do the paths and wood chips. So that's been at least 1 load a year back in here. So I bet we've put 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 2 loads for the new garden over there. We've probably gotten as many as 10 loads of wood chips into this place over the course of 5 years, ultimately. And I couldn't recommend it anymore. I've had not a single issue with it. It works great. The garden is so resilient from it. You know, these paths have moisture under them. And, you know, I can kick even on a really dry, hot day. I was showing people during the open garden. I kept doing that. You know, they were like, how much are you watering? Blah, blah, blah. It's hot, it's whatever. And I can just kick this wood chip material back and, you know, 3/4 of an inch down, there's water. Well, these plants are able to root into these paths and take advantage of that constant moisture that's in that wood chip path. So highly recommend it. And we use that, you know, chip drop website. Some people are not going to be able to get it. Some people are. We're lucky. We live in an old growth. We basically live in an old growth forest here in Raleigh, and there's constant chainsaws. I mean, you can hear them in the videos. A lot of times tree work is being done in here. So if I put my name down for chip drop, I can get it probably today. But for others, it may take a month. But make sure you're ready for it when you do put your name down, because it could be today for you. So make sure you have a place for them to dump it and you're ready to work with it. So there you go. Thank you guys. Ask questions in the comment section below this video, and we'll be back next week with another one. As you're seeing this video, we are on and off the road just a little bit, but I think you're going to see some unexpected content coming up from those travels. And there's my neighbor with telling me I need to stop talking with their alarm on their car. Thanks for watching.